Hello, World Civilization 107 class. Um, I just want to start off by really just congratulating you all on really just some quality uh, uh, discussions that are taking place with our open topics. I haven't been able to grade the exams yet. I'm trying to keep on top of things. But yeah, looking at the notes and looking at the discussions, and I'm seeing a lot of you, you're not just addressing the topics, which that's all you need to do to get a successful grade. But I'm really seeing many of you, look at the material and you're like, what? This is what happened. This is how the transatlantic slave industry operated. This is what it was. Leopold in Belgium and the Congo. What? Right? And you're seeing how the British intervening in Sudan and Egypt. You're seeing how Egypt's industry took a different turn with the U.S. Civil War, the interconnectedness of the global economy. You're looking at the Meiji Restoration, looking at Japan, and you're seeing how the foundation, from Matthew Perry, Matthew Perry, yeah, what's in my name? Anyways, the U.S. Navy coming in, right, and forcing Japan open, and basically all the kind of things that the West was doing, which was then forcing the rest of the world to be absorbed into the Western world. And wow, we get to World War II, all of a sudden things really make sense how we got there. I would argue that this is the foundation for even talking about why North Korea is the way it is to this day, and South Korea, um, and why China has a communist party in power. And I can go on and on, but we're going to get to all that later. Okay, so um, you all are starting to see that despite the fact that you're given tons of information thrown at you, you're seeing the connections of how it all fits in, right? And I hope that especially as you're doing this, like you see that the more effort you put into reaching out in life like this, you're gonna have more of this understanding open up to you. Today, okay, so I'm actually house sitting for my friends and bosses of my other job here. And I'm in this neighborhood in Portland, and a new African restaurant was just opened up just for a few days in. It's actually Somali, to be particular. So I go in to order dinner, and never had any of these meals. And there's a young guy, probably mid 20s, I'm guessing, sitting down. He starts trying to help me order, get an idea of what to get. Tells me what Somalis love to eat, how they like to eat. And then we have this great conversation, and he's talking about, appreciate how much he loves Portland. He lived in Alaska. He grew up in Uganda. He's from Somalia, but he's been a refugee. He was in the UN refugee camps, and he talked about being in limbo most of his life and how he kind of bounced around all over the place. And here he is in the United States legally as and he's just helping me appreciate his food, of his culture, and talking about you know various aspects of Somali culture. And it's interesting because a lot of people in Portland, I mean white Portlanders, they always say, I love Portland, but it's just not that diverse. And many people always say, oh, well, it could be more diverse. And honestly, Portland is more diverse than most places I've lived. But you have to go outside of certain zones. In other words, you have to get out of your comfort zone and start going into different parts of Portland. And there's so many different cultures here, and restaurants and places you can go to be exposed. So what it is that, are we being proactive in our lives to find ways in which to enrich our lives, and to be exposed and learn about all these other things. And just a little short interaction gives me added knowledge and thoughts about a lot of things that, you know, we were talking about. So I'll just not take too much longer, but just to say that as we go into this week and learning about communism, Russian Revolution, and all of this, I can't stress enough how, despite the fact that communism is not the competitor that it was coming after this time, but you can't understand almost anything going on right now without understanding this history. Why did Putin invade Ukraine? What's the relationship of Russia and the Ukraine? Also, what did it have to do with the Soviet Union and communism, and what didn't have to do with that? In other words, what's always been a part of Russia's sphere of influence, or its idea of itself, regardless of what ideology is the main driving force of the regime, the government in power, right? And also, then let's take a look at another way I want you to point out. I'm having you read like Lenin and Stalin. Does it like these are controversial characters, but they have a lot of influence. They had and they still do in many parts of the world, whether you believe it or not, or understand why. But let's take a look at it this way. Think about it. For all the bad we've heard about with communism, for people in the Congo, wasn't it the Western world, its human rights values, its liberalism, or whatever you want to call it, that was used as an excuse to destroy their entire society? So when Russia has a revolution and becomes communist, now all of the third world that's being colonized and oppressed by the West, that has democracies and constitutions and these capitalist democracies that they are saying are so great. Well, though, that's the world that is putting them down. That's one giving them taxation without representation. Do you guys understand what I'm saying? This will help you understand how we get to where we're at. Now, that doesn't mean that communism was able to deliver on what it said it would, and that became another set of problems. But that distracts us, I think, often from understanding how we got there. Look what's happening in Cuba right now. The US government is starving, literally destroying the entire lives of people in Cuba right now by imposing this blockade and sanctions, punishing the population in the hopes that it'll break the regime. Now, your whole life you've probably heard about evil regimes, that communists starve their people, and this is not a good regime. But here we are, in the name of fighting communism, we're starving the entire population. We're making sure they don't have access to heat, to electricity. We're choking them out, the island. That's what's happening. Pay attention. We might have a chance to talk about this more later. Why did Cuba go communist? What was the regime before? And look at the Cuban Missile Crisis. Let's also talk about that a little bit. You're going to see how close this almost turned us into a nuclear catastrophe. Everybody keeps forgetting, and I'm talking about our own leaders, European leaders. When Russia's fighting Ukraine, Russia still has all the nuclear weapons. The whole reason why we were doing the things that we did during the whole Cold War, which we'll cover some more, was to be careful, to watch out for the idea of mutually assured destruction. And it's almost like everybody's forgetting. I don't know. Okay, if Russia gets too upset, they can send off. Do we want to see? No, this is insanity. But what's happening with Iran right now? The United States is, before this war that the United States and Israel imposed on Iran. In other words, Israel and the United States started the war. They did. And you want to justify it? Fine. The Strait of Hormuz, which has around 20% of the world's industry, oil, all this stuff going through, was always open. Now we're really setting off potentially a global economic crisis before our very eyes right now. You want to talk about the interrelatedness of everything? You want to see how this slowly all goes down, and now the Houthis are shutting down the Red Sea. You talk about financial crisis. What is this going to do to regimes? Like, how is this going to change the world order that we have? I think there's a lot of things going on here. I feel like everything you've even been learning up until this point is going to help ground you to see how is it that we're in this world the way it is right now. Okay, so I'll leave it at that, and I wish you all well. Feel free to join me again on Zoom office hours and ask me any questions if you need anything. I hope all is well. We'll be in touch.